Welcome to the new school. What we wanted to do was talk about the concept of authenticity and vulnerability in an industry that has typically been super buttoned up, super professional, and a little bit old school.
Hello and welcome to the New School Video Podcast. In this episode, we speak to Tiffany Charles. She is the Chief Growth Officer of Destiny Capital and Entrepreneurs Alliance. So if you have got growth on your mind, and I know you all do, and you're wondering how to take your firm to the next level, and you want step-by-step play of like what others have learned and what has worked for them, then this is the episode for you. Tiffany will walk you through how she thinks about implementing marketing strategies and tactics, what she's learned in her role, how she came to her role. She actually was a fellow coach. How we met her was at a Limitless coaching retreat. And we were so impressed with her that we asked her if she would consider coming on our marketing masterclass. And she did. And she shared with advisors in our marketing boot camp how to create high converting webinars because they've had tremendous success with it. And she gave us play-by-play, step-by-step of what they do, what they've learned, and how other advisors can do the same. She'll also talk in this episode about her personal experience, career journey, getting to where she is, and how she thinks about helping the firm get to the next level. I think you're going to really enjoy this one, especially if you're considering how to implement systems and processes to support your marketing efforts. Let's get started. Tiffany, we're so excited to have you on the New School podcast. We met you at the Limitless Advisor Retreat in Nashville in, I think, September. Was it September?
Yeah.
And you were one of the coaches with us, which was really cool to have all the different points of views, but to be so philosophically aligned. We wanted to have you on the New School because you're doing a lot of cool things from a marketing lens. But we also wanted to find out really, like, I know there's been a lot of interest. You had articulated it back to us, and we're seeing more and more of the positions pop up over the industry. You are the Chief Growth Officer for Destiny Capital and Entrepreneurs Aligned. What does the Chief Growth Officer do? Like, what is your day to day? What are you accountable for? And how did you get to that role?
Yeah. So I think a CGO, very similar to a COO, can be a lot of different definitions. So it's really thinking through the areas of growth in a firm that you're focused on as a CGO. But my journey started back in 2011. I was in commercial real estate for 5 years prior. So I had a lot of fun riding that market up and then riding that market down. And made the switch into wealth management in 2011. And I sat in a lot of different roles. I got my foot through the door as an executive assistant, and then I sat in a pair planner role, and then I sat in an advisor role, an operations role, a little bit of compliance, and then eventually moved into an advisory role where business development was a core part of my earnings in order to thrive in that seat. Along the way, I saw a lot about the RA cultures that I just didn't fully align with, and I wanted to grow something very differently from an internal perspective. I felt like you could thrive without burning yourself out. And then I also thought advice is really important. And so we should be whole, healthy people to deliver that advice, and how you get that filtered. And then the other side was I saw a lot of partnerships, or lead advisors or owners of practice, and they were the only rainmaker. And you start seeing the generations come up where they're servicing advisors and they don't have the same sales skill set. And when it came time for some sort of transition or partnership to come in play, it was like the rainmaker was looking for the rainmaker, but the servicing advisor was like, I need you to respect what I'm doing. You wouldn't be able to make rain without, full levels of service, and just this evolution and a lot of breakups there. And I thought, man, that's super interesting. Business development feels like it could be really centralized, even in an RIA at a much smaller level, like the wirehouses do it, and some bigger RAs, but why aren't we doing that at a certain size, and really thinking through like growth being more centralized? And so through those experiences, and sitting in all of the seats, I started Chief Growth Officer thinking of 4 core concepts, which was revenue generation and responsibility there for the firm, marketing and brand strategy. I thought about people growth internally, like, and growing our team. And then I thought about client growth and client experience. So while it wasn't delivering the day to day, which was actually a below the line activity for me, I love uncovering and creating a roadmap of the value that a client would receive. I don't love doing the technical planning and all of the cool magic that gets them to stay. Like, it just wasn't my favorite thing to do. So selfishly, I also wanted a position that helped me thrive and where I could create a very valuable piece of the client experience, but didn't feel like I had to deliver it all the way through. So I really looked at it in those 4 components. And then I was like, what size firm needs all 4 of those in one person? Because as you grow, that inevitably should be several people. But, and then if you're too small, then it doesn't maybe make sense as a position, like you probably balancing that. So I figured it's hitting just when you're getting out of that lifestyle mode and going into that, what we maybe small giant, where you have a desire to grow, but you need to get to an enduring place. And it's beyond one person, and you really need to start creating centralized, scalable growth processes in order to get to those next levels of success. And so that's essentially where I ended up. I met my business partner, Jared, um, and he was a mentor of mine in the community. I actually called him to see how he got into EO. I wanted to get into EO, and I was like, "How did you do it?" And from there, we became buddies. And the firm Destiny Capital was in a great situation. They were about to go full second generation. Jared was already leading the decision making and those types of things. His dad was still founder. I was looking for that longer term and not being on the second half of, or like, I wasn't looking to align myself with a generation 1 partner, because the levels of growth that I was looking to achieve as a chief growth officer didn't necessarily philosophy align with a lot of the G1 advisors, or generation 1 advisors, as I would call them. I'm looking for a 30-year horizon. They may be on a 5-year. And so just some different philosophies there. So I found Jared, who was on a very similar path with a mission. He believed in centralized growth and scale, and was really excited to bring that into the firm. And so that's the journey of chief growth officer. And as I've grown, we've had to balance where growing the team falls under my plate. We do see that over time, really throwing more operations from a people management perspective. We've done really well in creating an environment where our talent can thrive and our incredible team can thrive. But now that's more and more of a job in its own. And so, like, in order to become predictable, we have to be careful as the chief growth officer and where my time is spent. And so those are things that as we've grown, we've started to learn. But that's where I started as CGO, was covering those 4 core components.
I feel like that was just like a master class in like how newer professionals into the industry could think about their future and have more control over sort of where they end up than some often do. Like, there's so many nuggets in there, Tiffany. Like, first of all, one of the things that I heard you say was you recognized what you loved about the role of financial advisor, but also what like wasn't super well suited to your own capabilities and desires, and having enough self-awareness to say like, I like this part, but I don't like this part. I think it's also pretty incredible that you had the ability to sort of like step out and look at the opportunities in the space for a position that I don't see it exist all that often at RIA firms that are not those like mega national, branded RIA firms. So to sort of have that foresight, and then to figure out how you wanted to get there, not G1, but look for someone G2 who shares a similar mindset. I mean, you share that story in such an easy way, but I want to just acknowledge that like that's very hard to do as a younger professional. and a great story for people who may be listening who are looking at what's next for them and where do they want to go. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I encourage like that the activities of where you get the most joy in your work, where you don't, and try to get to that at least 80% in the things that you enjoy. And then I when I think about the fact that 85% of the jobs that our kids are going to have haven't been created yet, like why don't we put ourselves into the position to see gaps that exist in the environments that we're in and create a position that can fill it in a really meaningful way. And I've learned the worst thing that can happen when you ask is a no. And so if you
Right.
just continue to put it out there, but I drew up this thing and I went and asked advisors what their thoughts were. And they were like, oh my gosh, like I would love to have that in my practice and fill that kind of gap. And so those were things where I was like, oh my gosh, this is a possibility. And then it just rolled from there.
I love what you said about like centralized growth function. So I think I've like known 2 or 3 chief growth officers. One of the gentlemen was a COO of a small RA. He came through our marketing boot camp actually. And it was interesting. As he was moving through the boot camp, he realized that his sole focus should be growth. And so he started to delegate anything that wasn't growth related. And all of a sudden, all his goals, while he was actually in our workshop, he started to like achieve them for the goal, for the firm. Like that was like the power of focus. But when you're thinking about kind of this traditional model of it, like an RA, you're right. Like there were the rainmakers, and then
Right.
there's the service models, and it kind of is based on their strengths, like their innate strengths, like what they feel comfortable with, like where they actually like to meet the client. Are they someone who likes to go and find new people, or are they someone who likes to build like longer, more enduring relationships? But if you think about a centralized growth function, where you are and maybe where you see it going, and if we were just to imagine that all firms had a centralized growth function, like what do you think that looks like?
I mean, I love this model. We were like, are we a hybrid firm where advisors are growing and the marketing? But I kind of think of us as a marketing firm that does wealth management as a CGO. And that's everything that I think about, right? We hear things like we're now technology companies that do wealth management, but I really look through the mindset of no, we're a marketing company that does wealth management because there's a lot of people out there waiting for us to be in front of them and to serve them. And we have the operational leverage that we need to now create very scalable growth. And so centralized growth is we have everything up to client signing an agreement go through the growth channel, and then it moves over to the client servicing teams. And for a while it was like, well, what is that going to be? Because it's a trusted relationship and all of those things. But my position when I'm in and meeting with a prospect is never to sell myself. It is to let them know the value that we can deliver them as a firm and the deep bench and experience and skill that we have as a team and what it means for them to have a team and why we feel like it's our fiduciary responsibility to bring the team that we do and each piece of it. And it's a really great story. But what that allows is that like the client experience has these core pieces, but it allows scalability in that growth. Like I'm not training 5 different advisors with 5 different ways to go to the sales and marketing process or uncovering like where's your strength in business development where they may not even love that as a piece of their job. Like they love going deep in financial planning. They want to have they're into the niche, they want to go deeper, they want to go into that technical piece, they want that relationship, but they're not like, please don't send me out into the networking world. Like, please, don't make me go and do that presentation. Now, there's always aspects of it, for growth as RIAs, still a majority of our referrals come through client experience, right? So they do contribute to growth and we can have really special campaigns built into that. But I get to help them think about those campaigns and ensure consistency because we're thinking of growth over here and then building that as into the client service model. They're not having to do and go out and find it. So we're trying not to be like a hybrid where advisor has to bring in 50% and we bring in 50%. We want them to curate through client experience growth, and we should see that. But outside of that, the digital marketing that we're doing, the onboarding, and then those become positions in themselves. And when you think about who you're hiring for an onboarding specialist, it's very different than a servicing advisor, right? Like if you were look to strength finders or a disc profile, or how they're showing up, it tends to be different. And so it gives us a lot of opportunity there. You can do variable pay if you're looking for that, right? From a business development perspective, versus a service, versus the servicing side and those types of things. It tends to be more stable income. And so you're just looking at all the different ways in which you can centralize each piece of that and continue to maintain focus, because we're always looking to be predictable. And part of the balance of part of being predictable is finding ways that you're not just like, oh, if lead gen's happening, then we have onboarding, which pulls on time, which then we have client servicing that pull on time. And you kind of go through this roller coaster of like, now I'm going through onboarding, so I'm not putting as much to lead gen, which then brings that down, which means now this part of my time I have to go out and fill. And we see that a lot in the RIAs. The goal is that we have consistent lead gen, consistent onboarding, and consistent client experience that allows that to continue to grow. Does that make sense?
Oh my gosh, makes so much sense. It's such an interesting, interesting is not the right word. It's such a timely conversation, which I know this isn't exactly what Candace had prepped me to talk about today, but I think it's such an interesting time to speak about this need of, specifically when you have those rainmaking first generation founding partners, just based on the law of time. Most founding partners in our industry are aging toward retirement and thinking about, what does that look like for me and for my firm? And how do I drive enterprise value? And a big part of driving enterprise value is demonstrating predictable and repeatable growth. And when you remove the rainmaker, who has been the person driving predictable and repeatable growth, then inherently, as a buyer of a potential selling business, that value goes down when the rainmaker leaves. And of course, there are like so many ways that you can overcome that. And I think that the investment bankers and M&A consultants in this industry have done a wonderful job of coming up with transition plans and buyouts and like all of that stuff. So like the truth is that everything is possible and everything works. It's what works best for you. But I think specifically what you're talking about, Tiffany, is sort of this concept of like removing that constraint from your business, and that you don't have like the key man risk, more or less. And the second thing that it does from like a G2 perspective, or, the younger advisors coming in, is it allows them to sort of, I think, step into their own power and not have to try to be like someone else, not try to be like the first generation. And listen, like generationally, we're so different, and like that just is, and it's proven, and there's data around the different generational tendencies and habits and instincts and drivers and motivations. And so someone who's, a boomer is going to approach biz dev very differently than a Gen X, than a millennial, and it just continues changing. And so I think what you've built is like this really incredible way of, you're driving towards growth and you have a really clear strategy and vision, but you're also answering or creating a solution for a problem that this industry is looking at and weighing like day in and day out. One thing that I would love to have a conversation about is like, I think what we experience here at Ficomm is that really good and successful branding and marketing within RIA firms is done by allowing advisors to build personal brands, which can sometimes be like in contrast to what you're building at Destiny Capital and Entrepreneurs Aligned, which is like Destiny Entrepreneurs Aligned is the brand, right? And then there's the service teams that are doing the service. So have you experienced that at all? With like, have you had anyone come in on the service team who like has grown into what if I wanted to be more present in my local markets? What if I wanted to have more influence externally in my communities? Like, what if I wanted to actually add a new layer to my role, which is biz dev? Like, have you had that happen, or have you thought about that?
So I would say we're probably still in like our infancy of the centralization and running this model. So we haven't had a ton of that yet. I do believe we have a couple of advisors who like they have some major talents in areas of growth. I think everyone has talents in growth, by the way. It's just finding the strategy that works really well for them. And so that over time is something that we want to continue to put into play. I believe in the personal brands for sure. So like I know that like our next ideas through that with the advisors is like how are they showing up in like social media in certain ways, or we have some really amazing presenters that would really like to do it. So we try to understand, do they like to write content? Is there things that they could do to start contributing to those things? For instance, our chief investment officer writes incredible content, and he has a real marketing and growth mindset around like how he can put it out and really bring in, and he really gets like the mission that we're on. So there's levels of like how can we start, then we already incorporate him, but like how can we can continue to create more growth and personal brand for him. So I think the cool thing about centralized growth is there's the ability to like move into that. And for instance, over time, if one of those advisors we find really is strong in that uncovering space and really kind of loves that, like, no, I love to get them to that point, like an onboarding specialist or something along those lines becomes a really ideal role. If they want to stay in that planning role, and the relationship, so we call it like the relationship and advice role, then they like that that is stays as a core concept for them. If they want, our investments are fully centralized too. If they want to move over to an investments role like over time, like they really just love digging into that. So ideally what we've created is variable career paths that could speak to, as they continue to do the work and find where they love their 80% and those types of things, that there's roles creation in our growth. But as far as the personal brand goes, I mean, in full honesty, like we're not quite there as a firm yet. But that will be the next piece as we really stabilize the transition that we had from first to second generation. Our client service model is continues to create capacity and really good experience, and then we'll move from there. But I have advisors that will lead client advisory boards. We have one that loves COIs. And so we're starting to work in like that COI marketing into their model, and how does that work and what's their responsibility. Like the phase one of that is through client experience while I maintain the business development portion of those relationships. Phase two of that is for her to start working into the business development portion of that COI marketing relationship. So it works really well to help them create their brand and the type of marketing and growth that they want to do. But we're still pretty early on right now.
I love the flexibility that's there. Like you've already thought about where you are today, where you want to go, and sort of what those career paths could look like.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it offers a lot more career pathing.
Yeah. And I think also what I'm hearing, which is like very aligned with what we think, is like this inside out marketing perspective where you're really evaluating like what are our unique strengths? What are the unique like interests of everyone, and how do we leverage them in a way that's really meaningful? Whereas I think like sometimes people like think there's a set way to do it, like there's a right way to do it. And so like instead of like assessing like, oh, you're really good at videos, you should be our YouTube star. You know what I'm saying? Like you are really good at going and meeting clients, so you should do the retail referral program or like whatever that looks like. It's almost like this is the role and this is what's required and you need to do these things. Whereas you're like saying like, be more fluid, right? Like see where each person's strengths are and then know where you want to go, and then just use those strengths in a way that actually helps you get there.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I really do believe everyone has the ability to be major business development rock stars, but it's a discipline, and it has to be something that you come to enjoy. And I think Candace, you and I talked about this, but all strategies work. You just can't work them all. So really spending time to figure out, where are they going to be in their superpower in growth, because confidence matters and discipline matters, and it's a process, right? Like you have to consistently get out there and nurture it, whatever it is, whether it's digital, whether it's in person, whether it's relationships, or whether it's just in front of your clients, and being able to share your story in a way that compels them to open doors. Like all of those things, all of them work. And so, yeah, we really work to see like where are those powers going to be, what do they enjoy, and what will allow them to be consistent in it for a period of time to actually gain the ROI on the marketing strategies that we're putting in place.
I feel like this episode really, I know we had one intention and we're going in another one, which is totally fine because there's so much we could talk about with you. And you've been on our marketing masterclass. And I think that is the joy and delight that we have in the podcast is like, we don't know where it's going to go. But I think that this is almost like a demonstration of G2. Like what is like G2, like in a firm, like
yeah, I think so. I think also it's something you said earlier, Tiffany, which totally resonates with us, which is you're a marketing firm that also does wealth management.
Yes.
And that's like, I mean, when I was at the Limitless Advisor Retreat, where were we? We were in Nashville. And it's the first time that I met you, and Candace and I were deciding where to go. And I was like, I'm going to sit in this room and I'm going to watch this presentation. And I remember sitting in the room and you were up presenting, and I know you weren't expecting to present in that session. I didn't know that until after the fact, and I would have never known if you hadn't told me. But I remember I looked to my left and I looked to my right and I looked behind me, and then I was like, is everyone seeing this? But it was my first experience at a Limitless Advisor Retreat. We're very, at Ficomm, we're very close with the Limitless team because we are so philosophically aligned. And so many Limitless advisors come through our advisor marketing bootcamp because there's just so much synergy between how advisors approach growth. But that was one of the things that made me feel so validated in being in the room and listening to you, specifically Tiffany, talk, was like, this is real. And we are at a moment in time in this industry where we're actually seeing the success of businesses like yours, which are marketing firms that also do wealth management. To your point, in the same way that there are technology firms that also do wealth management. And that's just like so core to a belief that I've had. It's one of the reasons I started this business. You know, like at Ficomm, we really what gets us going every day and brings us into the office and like fuels our passion is that like we really want to humanize wealth management so that we can transform the impact of financial advice for more people. And the way that we do that is through marketing. And so we've, for the last 10 and a half years that we've been in business, have been trying to help the industry, like demonstrate to the industry, bring thought leadership and insights and education to the industry to demonstrate that like marketing isn't just a line item on your P&L, and it's not just an afterthought. Like it is core to building a successful wealth management business. I've always believed that. I didn't see it in the industry. And so now what I love so much and like what gets me so excited about this conversation with you is like, it's not a thought that you're having. It's an actual business that you're running successfully, that is growing. You told us right before we hit record that you this year you're experiencing the growth that you knew would come after the years of work that you've put into transitioning between G1 to G2, the strategy that you've had in your mind, the vision that you've had that you've been chasing after and building towards, and it's working. You're getting 1 to 2 new inbounds a week. I mean, like it's such like, and honestly, it's like emotional for me because it's such an important moment in this industry for people of however long you've been in the business, whatever your experience is, to see like this is happening, this is working, and the potential and the opportunity for this industry is massive because there are more Americans who need really great financial planning, wealth management advice than we currently have advisors to do it. And you're building a business that is going to be able to grow in a really scalable way to serve more people. Like, how amazing is that? And so for us to be able to share this story to the industry is like so powerful. And I think my question to you is like, do you feel that? Like, do you know that?
Oh my gosh, with every bone in my body. Like I mean, I knew when I got into wealth management that this was the industry that, quite frankly, you can change the world from your little corner to shift the way in which money flows and make it so positive and influential, and to give advisors in an environment where they can truly align with their passion and mission. Like, I look at our advisors and they're just so talented and they have that capacity. And like, I'm like, my job is to get out there and for all of those people that are waiting, to get them in the hands of the right advisors, doing the right things, right? That are specializing in the right ways. They're not going miles wide, they're going deep, and they understand the importance of the relationship and the trust and the advice that is our IP. And so like, and for Ficomm, like, we're so aligned. Like what you guys are out doing, I'm like, oh my gosh, how can I help you in any way? Because it's so important. Because there are so many people waiting on all of the good advisors. Like, our industry shifted in such a way where it used to be you needed to get, we sold to get the permission to eventually actually do the planning. And now we have advisors like, no, planning comes first and the value. And then now they understand they have to truly build that relationship for even that technical aspects of the great things that we can do to have a place for that to land. So we're in such a beautiful place. And then marketing has taken like a huge aspect, like to have Ficomm where I'm like, oh my gosh, if I could have had someone mentoring or hiring me on like all of the plates that spin and which one should we do, I feel like I'm just like, I trial and I fail and I trial and I succeed. Luckily, I'm in a position that's 90% of my job. So I have the ability and the space to do that. For the firms that don't, like, the amounts of marketing that happens and like truly understanding where it starts coming into play. To what you said, I've been sitting in a seat since 2018, and we were transitioning, and my job was to come in and grow this firm, and it's taken time. And as a CGO and revenue being one of the core components, like, that's not easy, to sit there and be like, numbers are reflective of what my job is. But there was so much more there, recognizing that you need operational leverage in order for growth to be sustainable. So there's levels of slow down to speed up, right? There's levels of putting process in place. So the system has to be stronger than the task. Marketing's a system. And when you are building, executing, leading strategy, it becomes so much. And so to have a firm like Ficomm that's like, listen, hand in hand, we can get through that and build that, and we can create that centralization, that repeatability, that consistency. Like, it's like you guys are, fractional CGOs that go into these companies and help them build to find that space.
We
And
think
then
so.
yeah. And like, I'm like, and that's why we connected so much. I'm like, yes, you guys get it. And so much more on the digital side. I mean, a lot of my success came through more of those traditional marketing means, like COI, client relationships, those types, thought leadership, webinars, like that kind of people to people piece. And now I'm really just diving into all of those digital pieces because our world is shifting. Marketing shifts so fast. What was hot last year switches so quickly, and it's like, okay, now we're giving away what makes a good lead mag, and how do you get that and capture that? I mean, our CTAs could be so much stronger, and those are pieces that I get excited to move into. And quite frankly, those are pieces that I'm like, maybe I should hand those off, right? Like, a marketing manager could be a really, really important key hire for us as we continue to grow, and we continue to centralize every aspect of the growth. So I'm just in such alignment with you, and I feel your mission in such a big way. And to get out there, like, I really believe it. People are waiting on all of us, and they need us, and they need us now more than ever, with the amount of retiring and wealth transition and just what's happened, just ability for them to feel in their power and in their money. And we have what I think are the very best advisors. And I feel my daily mission is to, like, get as many people as I can in front of them. And so I think that's what's cool about having somebody in my seat, is like, if you can like, you can connect to your team the way that I am, like, you can't help but to show up every day and be like, I need to do my best to knock this out of the park, because these clients deserve it and my team deserves it, right? Like, they deserve the relationship that they're here for. And so, yeah, I love it.
One of the questions we get, just to like tie this all like in a neat package, is we were coaching at a G2 summit for BNY Mellon. Yes. Pershing. Yeah. And it was a G2 audience, right? Really accomplished, really smart, like all different roles. Like, their questions were like so smart, especially from a marketing lens. And so I kind of had two things to say about it, which is, one, like, echoing everything you said. What I also love right now is the barrier to entry is very low.
from a marketing perspective. Like I think people don't realize that you don't have to have these huge budgets.
Right.
And what we've seen, as you know, from the Limitless Advisor, is the scrappy advisors are figuring out organic growth bigger, faster, and more effectively than the big firms with unlimited resources, right? Because to your point of everything that you said, they're watching, they're listening, they're adjusting. Like those are like key points, and they just keep moving. So I think that's like fundamental. But when we think about this audience of like G2, and we're seeing it like there's all these G2 coaching groups now, we're seeing like more than I think we've ever seen before, which is significant, is they have all these marketing questions. And one of them will be like, well, we don't really want the type of client that G1 has, right? Yeah. We want to change the marketing. And then the question becomes, where do we start? I remember one gentleman, one of the recent ones, we don't even have a website, okay? But like very successful, very successful. They've just grown in really different ways. But they do wonder, and the question I know you get asked a lot is like, when do we hire a CMO or like a senior marketing person? Like that's what we should do. But like reflecting on this conversation, first of all, I love that you say CGO. Like that's just like the lingo. Now I'm just gonna like drop it into my conversations. It's like I'm like now thinking like the role to hire is a CGO.
Well, it's definitely you should never start with a senior marketing strategist because that person is going to expect a team and a budget and things that typically don't exist. So yeah, I mean, I think hiring a CGO like this, what you've illuminated today, Tiffany, is like such a clear path that other firms can follow, that works, and that, I think that like demonstrates to the industry what's possible. I think too, though, like even just maybe before you would have the foresight to hire a CGO, like I think you are really clear on your vision and your values and the change that you wanted to create. And it sounds like Jared, your partner, was also really clear on vision and values and change to create. And so that was like a magical, like kismet moment of like coming together and recognizing that was aligned. And so I feel like even before the CGO, it's like
you have
to have the clarity of your vision, and then it's how do you get to the vision. And yeah, I think any RIA firm that doesn't have a chief growth officer that is listening to this, thinking about how are we going to drive organic growth, and when we're coming into a new chapter in this industry where we're not going to have the same type of market movement that we've had over the last decade, and so organic growth is going to become so much more acute. The need for it is going to become so much more acute. You've got an industry that has grown primarily through inorganic growth, so mergers and acquisitions getting much more expensive with the cost of capital. That's not going to change anytime soon. In the interest rate environment, you've got the aging client population. Like all of these things are really coming together to say, you have to figure out where you're going to drive growth. And so having this internal centralized growth position that's focused on repeatable, scalable, process-driven growth is
identifying people's strengths within the team.
There's so many things.
Yeah, but I mean,
she's a unicorn.
I know.
Well, I think there was like this, like I was worried when I looked at the position and some of the breakups was like, if a partnership was like one lifestyle, one growth oriented, like we would eventually see friction in that partnership. And I was like, I'm kind of this unique person that can pop over operationally to create some leverage there and then pop over to growth. And I was like, that works when we need to put the brakes on and then when we need to put the gas on to like really help us as a firm to allow me to kind of float, because I'm like, I don't want to be the person that's like, well, if you don't want to grow, then I'm going to be over here coasting on all of the growth that I did because that's what you hired me to do. I wanted to be a true partner in like scaling and trying this concept. And I was so grateful that Jared took the chance on me, and he believed in that model and wanted to scale it that way. And I think there's a lot of ways that you can think about it. One of the biggest things is when I talk about this role, a lot of lead advisors or owners or whatever, they're like, I think that's what I want. Like, I think that's my role. So like a lot of the times it's like not even necessarily going out to find your CGO. It's like learning how to become your own CGO and starting to transition those other pieces of the business and Meg, to your point, like, creating that enduring wealth, thinking about your valuation, thinking about it from a business perspective and what that puts you in, and then it's not about just becoming a CGO where you're still like the growth is fully dependent on you. It's like learning how to like shift that growth to the firm and allowing your firm to take identity versus yourself. Like we say we and team, like we don't say I, right? Like I talk about Destiny Capital and Entrepreneur Line. I don't talk about Tiffany or Jared. Like we have our own personal brand. We know where our identity is in that, but like the work that we do is never us. And that's a big transition, especially if you've been the superhero in so many roles in your firm, right? You're the client's advisor and giving up some of that control. Like, oh, what's really important is that our advisors have the permission to develop really meaningful relationships with our clients. Do you know how nerve-wracking that is when you own the company and you don't have those relationships or those control? But like that's we're on a mission to serve more, and we're on the mission to give our advisors that permission to develop that, and then ensure that we're all in a really good place to ensure those client relationships are good, the business is good, and the advisors are good. It takes a different way of thinking and agreements with your team and your clients. And so it's been interesting, but there's so many roles that you can start with, right? Like for me in that size, I had to be responsible for client experience and thinking through the service model that we would be promising to ensure what we were promising can be delivered, and then ensure that there was capacity for that to really consistently be delivered. And I think originally when I thought CGO, I was going to be the CRO, like the more chief revenue officer would drive most of that. And it's still really, really important, but that wasn't my role coming in. It really did have that flexibility of where that operational piece needed versus the growth piece needed. And I think that's why it works at a smaller firm versus being so high is that fluidity of need in the firm to become consistent. But it's been patient. We've had a lot of success. We've had a lot of failures. I think we're getting to the point now where everything is growth oriented. So as soon as we fully prove up that growth model, it'll feel really, really good. Like that this thing that we believe in, the thing that you're believing in, like truly operates well in the business. And then it can flush out all of the like, hey, maybe you would want to hire. I mean, there's so many options now, but virtual marketing pieces that come in, have somebody build your marketing platforms and your marketing stuff. Like, don't try to do all of that yourself. Like those are things where I wish I had more foresight and a little less resistance to looking, instead of a people hire internally, like what options are available as third party and vendors and virtually, because I think that really could have helped us along the way.
Well, you've given so many takeaways to me and to Candace and to our viewers and our listeners. I mean, like really this roadmap for building a wealth management, a marketing firm that also does wealth management, really like how to approach transitions from G1 to G2, how to really set up and structure a business in a way that can build repeatable, scalable, predictable growth. And then two other key takeaways before we'll wrap up that I just want to make sure that our listeners and viewers don't miss. But one is, I know, Tiffany, like how much you believe in and have benefited from the power of community. And so like you talked about you and Jared connecting over EO, which is Entrepreneurs Organization, which is a global community of entrepreneurs that I'm also privileged to be a part of. That's like such a great community for business owners. I know that you're part of the Limitless Advisor community as well. It's similar to like our advisor marketing bootcamp community, which those two are super aligned. So like the power of community is so important to be able to give and receive feedback and share experiences with peers and like have the ability to test some boundaries in a really protected environment. I can just see and experience how impactful that's been for you. And then I also want to we haven't covered as much, but I want to make sure our audience here is like, you are the definition of a go-giver. I don't know if you've read the book Go Giver, but you are a go-giver. I introduced you to one of our former colleagues who had moved to your area, who was looking for a job. She's studying for a CFP, and you were so kind and so generous in your willingness to just mentor her and give her like the insight and guidance and feedback that she needed. And so I know how much you give, like being here today, you're giving to us and to our community. You've done it on master classes for us. I see you doing it within the Limitless Advisor community. And so thank you for being a go-giver. And I also love seeing that, like, it's true. If you give more, you will receive more. And so you're just such a beautiful demonstration of that. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, having the secret sauce is such an old way of thinking. I believe that there's plenty for all of us and to be out there supporting one another to do our best work. And you're right. Like the power of community is something that I just think is so special. And giving is where it starts. And that's a really big marketing concept right now too, by the way, right? Like it's about giving the information and not making it so locked up or that they even have to give you anything to receive it. So there's this whole new level there. And so I feel really grateful for the opportunity to be in service of communities, to share with the advisors. So many good advisors out there. They're working with you to figure out how do they get in front of all of the people that they can. And if there's anything that I can do to support that community, I'm in it and I'm happy to.
I learned from TikTok, it's called no gatekeeping. So that's what I don't gatekeep, and they tell the stories and they tell the information. This is what I've learned from Gen Z. Tiffany, before we close up, we ask every guest, what does the new school mean to you?
You know, the new school for me means that that we're in our power, you know, that we're doing it from a place of authenticity. I very much believe in authenticity. I believe we can do it with full personal agency. My job came with me creating it, defining it, finding it, and now having control over the decisions and actions and my calendar and every piece of it. And I think that personal agency takes us to a whole new level of accountability and high performance happiness. And so if you can do that in a skin that you feel comfortable in, and especially for all of the women that came, I mean, personally, I'm going to give a women shout out here, but they didn't get to do it the same way I get to. I get to sometimes cry in front of my team. I get to feel the, you know, make the conversations we're having today about what we're truly out. And I get to have all of those feels and exactly who I am. And so I try to think about creating that for the next generation of like, you can be exactly humanly who you are and be a leader. You can be in a position that makes you feel over the top. You can create it. And so just step into that.
Thank you so much for coming on the new school. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming on our masterclass, which we're still implementing some of the stuff usual, like how to have high converting webinars. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm all over LinkedIn, so feel free. And if you go to our website, there's contact information there as well. So you're more than welcome to reach out. We run webinars and all of the fun things. Certainly the Limitless community. I'm an advisor coach there, so consistently doing mentorship on a monthly basis through the Limitless community. And I hope to be doing more with Ficomm.
Thank you so much, Tiffany.
Yeah.
Thank you.